Commander Zexthal walked into the great hall where the Council of War waited for him. His blue scales caught the light from the crystal lamps above. Scars marked his arms and chest, proof of 3 years fighting the Vorthan Empire. The other. Corvan officers sat in their seats, eager to hear about the weak humans he had been forced to work with. Zexthal had not wanted this job. Working with humans seemed like punishment to him. Everyone knew humans were soft. They had no claws, no thick skin, no poison. They were small and weak compared to most fighting species in the galaxy. The Council had sent him to watch them and report back on their failures. "Tell us about the humans," said General Carathan, the head of the War Council. "How badly did they fight? Did they run when the real fighting started?" Zexthal stood silent for a moment. The room fell quiet. Every officer leaned forward to hear his words. "We were wrong about them," Zexthal said. His voice was low and serious. "Very wrong." The officers looked at each other with surprise. Some laughed quietly, thinking he was making a joke. 3 years. Ago, Zexthal had landed on the human military base on Kepler Station. He expected to find cowards and fools. Instead, he met Colonel Jack Murphy, a human with gray hair and tired eyes. Murphy was shorter than most Corvans and had no visible weapons. He smiled too much and made jokes during serious meetings. "Welcome to our little war," Murphy had said when they first met. "Hope you brought your sense of humor. You'll need it out here." Zexthal had thought the human was an idiot. Real warriors did not joke about war. They did not smile when discussing battle plans. They certainly did not treat enemy attacks like games. The first real test came 2 days later. Zexthal was on patrol with a mixed unit of humans and Corvans. Sergeant Lisa Baker led the humans. She was small even for her species, with short brown hair and quick movements. When Corvan scouts spotted Vorthan warriors in the hills, standard. Procedure was to fall back and call for support. "Contact ahead," the scout reported. "At least 6 Vorthans, maybe more." Baker did not hesitate. "Move up," she ordered her squad. "Let's go say hello." Zexthal could not believe what he heard. The humans were advancing toward the enemy instead of retreating. This went against every rule of smart warfare. You gathered information first. You called for backup. You made a plan. The humans made no plan. They just moved forward. The first Vorthan that came into view was huge, even by their standards. It stood 3 meters tall with thick armor plating and razor claws. Its roar echoed through the rocky canyon. Any sensible being would have run. Baker charged straight at it. Zexthal watched in shock as the tiny human female sprinted toward a creature that could tear her apart with one swipe. She carried only a standard rifle and wore basic armor. She had no chance in close combat. But something strange happened when the Vorthan tried to grab her. Baker moved like water, sliding under, its claws and putting 3 shots into its weak spots before it could react. The monster fell backward, blue blood spraying from its wounds. "Next!" Baker called out, already looking for another target. The other humans moved the same way. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like wild animals that had learned to use guns. Private Ryan Cole jumped onto a Vorthan's back and rode it like some kind of beast, firing his weapon into its head until it collapsed. Corporal Danny Wright used his rifle like a club when his ammunition ran out, beating a Vorthan warrior until it stopped moving. Zexthal had seen many battles. He knew what normal combat looked like. This was not normal. This was madness. When the fight ended, 6 Vorthans lay dead. The humans had taken no serious injuries. They stood among the bodies, breathing hard but grinning at each other like they had just finished a fun game. "Good work, people," Baker said. "Who wants to carry the trophy heads back to base?" Trophy heads. They wanted to cut off the enemies' heads and carry them home like prizes. Zexthal felt his stomach turn. Even Corvans, who were no strangers to violence, found this behavior disturbing. Colonel Murphy's voice came over the radio. "How did it go out there?" "Standard Tuesday," Baker replied. "6 down, none up. We'll be back for dinner." Standard Tuesday. They talked about killing 6 enemy warriors like it was a regular task, something they did every week. Zexthal began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake about these creatures. That night, he watched the humans in their common area. They ate together, laughed together, told stories about home. Baker showed pictures of her daughter. Cole talked about his mother's cooking. Wright read a letter from his girlfriend. They looked so normal, so peaceful. But Zexthal had seen what they became when violence started. The change was instant and complete. One moment they were gentle beings talking about family. The next moment they were predators that killed without hesitation or fear. "You look confused," Murphy said, sitting down next to him. "I do not understand your people," Zexthal admitted. Murphy nodded. "That's fair. We don't understand ourselves most of the time. But out here, understanding isn't as important as trust. Do you trust us?" Zexthal thought about Baker charging the Vorthan. About Cole riding the enemy like a wild creature. About Wright beating monsters with his bare hands. "Yes," he said, "I trust you, but I also fear you." Murphy smiled. "Good. Fear keeps you alive out here. Tomorrow we hit a Vorthan supply base. You'll see more of what we can do." Zexthal spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what kind of species he was really dealing with. The humans slept peacefully around him, but he could not forget the look in their eyes during battle. It was not the look of civilized beings, it was the look of something much older and much more dangerous. The council officers shifted in their seats as Zexthal continued his report. They had expected to hear about human weakness and failure. Instead, they heard something that made no sense to their logical minds. "The attack on the mining colony changed everything I thought I knew about warfare," Zexthal said. "The humans do not fight to win. They fight to make sure their enemy loses, even if it kills them. The battle for Kepler 442b had started like any normal military operation. Intelligence reports showed a Vorthan force had taken the mining colony and was using it as a base. The plan was simple: surround the base, cut off supplies, and wait for surrender. Clean and efficient. The humans had other ideas. "We go in hard and fast," Colonel Murphy announced during the briefing. "No siege, no waiting. We hit them now." Zexthal had tried to explain why this was wrong. "The Vorthans have superior numbers and defensive positions. A direct assault will result in heavy casualties." Murphy had looked at him with those tired human eyes. "Maybe, but every day we wait, they dig in deeper. And there are still civilians in that colony. We don't abandon our people." The assault began at dawn. Zexthal watched from his position as the humans advanced across open ground toward the heavily defended colony. Vorthan energy weapons lit up the morning sky. The smart thing would have been to retreat after the first wave of fire. The humans kept coming. Private Ryan Cole was in the front line when a Vorthan blast shattered his left arm. The bone broke so badly that white pieces stuck through his skin. Any normal soldier would have fallen back for medical treatment. Cole wrapped his broken arm against his body and kept fighting with his rifle held in one hand. When his ammunition ran out, he used the rifle as a club. When the rifle broke, he picked up rocks and threw them at the enemy. When he ran out of rocks, he used his good hand to punch a Vorthan warrior in the face until it stopped moving. "Why does he not retreat?" Zexthal asked Sergeant Baker, who was coordinating the assault from behind cover. "Because the guy next to him is still fighting," Baker said. She fired 3 quick shots at a Vorthan position. "And because retreat means the enemy wins." This made no sense to Zexthal. Retreat was a tactical choice. You fell back, regrouped, and attacked again with better odds. You did not throw your life away for no gain. But the humans did not see it as no gain. For them, Every moment they held their ground was a victory. Every Vorthon they killed was progress. Every step forward was worth dying for. Captain Helen Ross proved this point in the most horrible way possible. Her unit was pinned down in a crater while Vorthon forces moved to surround them. The logical choice was to surrender or retreat. Instead, Ross stood up in full view of the enemy and charged. Their strongest position. "Cover me!" she called to her troops. "I'm going to clear a path." Zexthal watched in horror as energy blasts cut through Ross's armor. She stumbled but kept running. More shots hit her. She fell to one knee, then got back up. Blood ran down her face and arms. She reached the Vorthon position and threw herself on top of their heavy weapon. The explosion killed her instantly, but it also destroyed the gun that had been pinning down her unit. Her soldiers used the opening to advance and take the position. "She chose to die," Zexthal said to Baker afterward. "She could have lived if she had retreated." "Yeah," Baker said, "but if she had retreated, 6 other people would have died instead." Helen did the math and made her choice. The math. The humans talked about death like it was a problem they could solve with numbers. They calculated acceptable losses and then accepted them. They did not mourn their dead until after the battle was won. The strangest part came during the medical evacuation. Human medics moved through the battlefield treating anyone who was wounded, including enemy soldiers. Corpsman Danny Wright crawled under enemy fire to reach a wounded Vorthon warrior. The Vorthans stopped shooting when they saw what he was doing. They could not understand why an enemy would risk his life to save their wounded. Wright bandaged the Vorthan's injuries and gave him water before moving on to the next casualty. "Your medic is helping our enemies," Zexthal pointed out to Murphy. "Danny helps anyone who needs help," Murphy replied. "That's his job. The war can wait while he saves lives." This confused the Vorthans so much that they held their fire until Wright finished his work. Some of them even helped him carry wounded soldiers to safety. The humans' act of mercy had done more to disrupt enemy operations than any weapon. But Zexthal learned that human mercy had limits. When the Vorthans killed a medic during a later battle, the humans became something different. They stopped taking prisoners. They stopped showing mercy. They fought like machines programmed only to destroy. Lieutenant Ben Parker held the evacuation point alone for 6 hours after his unit was ordered to fall back. His ammunition ran out after the first hour. His radio broke after the second hour. By the 4th hour, he was fighting with nothing but a combat knife and pieces of broken equipment. Zexthal monitored the situation from the command post. Why does he not retreat? His position is hopeless. Murphy was staring at a photo on his desk. It showed Parker with a human female and a small child. "Ben's got a 3-month-old daughter back home. Her name is Emma. She took her first steps last week." I do not understand the connection. Ben knows that if he retreats, the Vorthans will overrun the evacuation zone. That means civilians die. That means kids like Emma die. Murphy put the photo away. Ben would rather die himself than let that happen. Parker held his position until reinforcements arrived. When they found him, he was surrounded by dead Vorthans and barely alive himself. His knife was broken. His armor was destroyed, but he was still fighting. "Status report," were his first words when the rescue team reached him. Not "help me" or "I'm hurt." He wanted to know if the mission was complete. He wanted to know if the civilians were safe. His own survival was less important than the job he had been given. This was when Zexthal realized the truth about humans. They were not fighting for territory or resources or even survival. They were fighting for ideas that existed only in their minds. Ideas like duty and honor and love. These ideas made them stronger than any weapon. A human who fought for his family was more dangerous than 10 soldiers fighting for pay. A human who fought for his beliefs was unstoppable. The Vorthans never learned this lesson. They kept trying to break human morale by killing their soldiers, But every human death just made the survivors fight harder. Every loss became a reason for revenge. When the colony was finally liberated, the humans did not celebrate their victory. They mourned their dead and prepared for the next battle. War, for them, was not about winning and losing. It was about protecting what they loved. Zexthal had seen enough to know that his people had made a serious mistake about these creatures. The humans were not weak. They were the most dangerous species he had ever encountered. And the worst part was that they did not even know how dangerous they were. They thought they were just doing their job. The council chamber had grown very quiet. Several officers looked uncomfortable as Zexthal continued his report. What he described did not match their understanding of how civilized beings should behave in war. The humans have emotions that make no sense, Zexthal said. But these emotions make them stronger, not weaker. I learned this during the siege of Firebase Delta. Firebase Delta was a small human outpost built on a rocky hill. It had no strategic value except that it controlled a mountain pass. The Vorthans wanted the pass, so they sent 10,000 warriors to take it. The humans had 200 soldiers to defend it. Any logical commander would have ordered immediate evacuation. 200 against 10,000 was not a battle. It was suicide. But Lieutenant Ben Parker, who had been promoted after his heroic stand at the evacuation zone, was in command. He looked at the odds and made a decision that horrified Zexthal. "We hold the line," Parker announced to his troops. "No retreat, no surrender, we make them pay for every meter." Zexthal tried to reason with him. "This position cannot be defended. You will all die for nothing." Parker showed him the photo he always carried. His daughter Emma, now walking and smiling. Not for nothing. For her. For everyone like her. The siege began with artillery bombardments. That shook the mountain. Vorthon energy weapons turned the rocky ground into molten glass. Any sensible being would have broken under such punishment. The humans dug deeper and fought back. What amazed Zexthal was how they handled stress. When supplies ran low, they shared everything equally. When soldiers were wounded, others took on extra duties without complaint. When the situation looked hopeless, they told jokes and made plans for impossible victories. Major Chris Anderson was the perfect example of this strange human psychology. He lost both legs to a Vorthan artillery strike on day 3 of the siege. Any other species would have considered him finished as a fighting soldier. The humans simply gave him a wheelchair and put him in charge of communications. Anderson continued, to coordinate the defense while bleeding from wounds that should have killed him. He gave orders, directed fire missions, and encouraged his troops as if losing his legs was just a minor inconvenience. "How are you still fighting?" Zexthal asked. Him during a brief lull in the battle, Anderson looked down at his missing legs and shrugged. "Still got my arms. Still got my brain, still got my people counting on me." He paused to give orders to a mortar team. "Besides, my wife would kill me if I came home without finishing the job." The humans talked about their families constantly. During the siege, they showed pictures of children, spouses, parents. They read letters from home and shared stories about birthday parties and school plays and family dinners. These memories seemed to feed their fighting spirit. Sergeant Lisa Baker, now a hardened veteran after multiple battles, explained it to Zexthal during one of the quiet moments. "You fight differently when you have something to protect. The Vorthons are fighting for territory. We're fighting for the people we love." This emotional connection to the war made the humans unpredictable in ways that confused their enemies. They could be laughing and joking one moment, then killing with cold efficiency the next. They compartmentalized their feelings in ways that seemed impossible. Private Amy Foster was a pilot who had been grounded when her fighter was damaged. She spent her days repairing equipment and her nights writing letters to her boyfriend back home. She seemed like the gentlest person Zexthal had ever met. She fed stray animals and helped wounded soldiers and always had a kind word for everyone. When Vorthon commandos broke through the perimeter on day 7, Foster transformed into something else entirely. She picked up a rifle and moved through the base like a predator hunting prey. Her movements were smooth and deadly. Her shots never missed. The gentle girl who fed stray cats became a killing machine that terrified the enemy. "How do you change? So quickly?" Zexthal asked her afterward. "I don't change," Foster said. "It's all the same thing. I protect what I love. Sometimes that means feeding a hungry animal. Sometimes it means killing the thing that wants to hurt my friends." This was the key to understanding humans, Zexthal realized. Their capacity for love and their capacity for violence came from the same source. They were not separate emotions. They were the same emotion pointed in different directions. The siege continued for 18 days. The humans ran out of food on day 12. They ran out of medical supplies on day 15. They ran out of ammunition for their heavy weapons on day 16. But they never ran out of reasons to fight. They made weapons from scrap metal. They used explosives made from cleaning supplies. They set traps using nothing but rocks and rope. When they had no more bullets, they threw stones. When they had no more stones, they used their bare hands. The most frightening thing was how they got stronger as the situation got worse. Other species broke down under extreme stress. Humans entered what they called the zone, a state of enhanced focus where they seemed to become more than they normally were. Corporal Danny Wright, the medic who had treated enemy wounded, showed this clearly. By day 10 of the siege, he was performing surgery with tools meant for repairing equipment. He had no medical supplies left, so he sterilized his instruments with alcohol meant for cleaning electronics. He saved lives using nothing but skill and determination. "Where did you learn to do this?" Zexthal asked, watching Wright remove shrapnel from a soldier's chest using a pair of wire cutters. "I didn't," Wright said, not looking up from his work. "I'm making it up as I go. But this man has a family waiting for him. That means I figure out how to save him." The Vorthans began to break on day 15. They had overwhelming advantages in numbers, weapons, and supplies. But they could not understand an enemy that fought harder as their situation grew more desperate. Vorthon commanders started making mistakes. Vorthon soldiers began to hesitate before attacking positions defended by humans. The siege ended not because the humans were defeated, but because the Vorthons gave up. 10,000 warriors retreated rather than face 200 humans who refused to die. The psychological impact of human determination proved more powerful than any weapon. When relief forces finally arrived, they found the human survivors sitting among the bodies of their enemies, calmly eating the last of their emergency rations. They looked like they had been through hell, but they were still making jokes and planning their next mission. "Status report," Colonel Murphy said when he arrived to take command. "All objectives secured," Parker replied. "Ready for orders." They had held an impossible position for 18 days against overwhelming odds, and they were ready to do it again, if necessary. This was not courage as other species understood it. This was something deeper and more dangerous. This was the human refusal to accept defeat, no matter what the cost. The Corvin officers in the council chamber sat in complete silence now. Some had stopped taking notes. Others stared at Zexthal with expressions of disbelief and growing fear. What he described challenged everything they thought they knew about. Warfare and civilized behavior. The humans have a concept they call impossible, Zexthal continued. But for them, impossible does not mean something cannot be done. It means the price will be very high, and they are always willing to pay that price. Zexthal had learned this lesson during the final months of his assignment, when he witnessed what humans could endure when pushed to their absolute limits. The siege of Firebase Delta had been impressive, but it was nothing compared to what happened at Outpost 7. Outpost 7 was not even supposed to be a military target. It was a research station studying mineral deposits on a dead moon. The facility had minimal defenses and a civilian staff of scientists and engineers. When the Vorthons decided to capture it for strategic reasons, they expected no resistance. They were very wrong. The station commander was Captain Kate Sullivan, a former combat engineer who had requested the quiet assignment after losing her husband in an earlier battle. She had 50 security guards, 30 maintenance workers, and 40 scientists under her command. Most had never seen real combat. When Vorthon warships appeared in orbit, Sullivan's first action was to send the civilians to the underground shelters. Her second action was to arm everyone who could hold a weapon. Her third action was to send a message to the approaching enemy fleet. "Unknown vessels, you are approaching a protected research facility. Turn back or face the consequences." The Vorthon commander found this message amusing. One small outpost threatening an entire battle fleet was beyond ridiculous. He responded by demanding immediate surrender. Sullivan's reply became famous among human military forces. "Come and take it." The bombardment began within hours. Vorthon energy weapons turned the surface installations into burning ruins. The landing craft that followed carried 3,000 elite warriors, enough to conquer a small planet. They expected to find survivors hiding in the ruins, ready to surrender. Instead, they found prepared defensive positions and humans who had no intention of giving up. Dr. Frank Miller, a geology professor who had never held a weapon before this day, manned a heavy gun position that covered the main landing zone. When Vorthon warriors charged his position, he held the trigger down until the weapon overheated and stopped working. Then he picked up rocks and threw them at the enemy until other humans could reach his position. "Why are the civilians fighting?" Zexthal asked Sullivan during a brief break in the assault. "Because this is their home," Sullivan replied, "and humans defend their homes." The battle was not like anything Zexthal had seen before. The humans had no hope of military victory. They were outnumbered 60-1. They had no heavy weapons, no air support, and no possibility of rescue. But they fought anyway. What made it worse for the Vorthons was that the humans were learning as they fought. Dr. Sarah Kim, a chemist, figured out how to make explosives from laboratory chemicals. Professor Joe Adams, who studied rock formations, used his knowledge to set up rockfall traps that crushed Vorthon squads. Even the teenagers who worked as research assistants became effective fighters within hours. The Vorthons had fought many species during their expansion across the galaxy. They understood how normal beings reacted to overwhelming force. They broke quickly when faced with impossible odds. These humans seemed to get more dangerous as their situation became more hopeless. By the end of the first day, the Vorthons had taken heavy casualties despite their advantages. By the end of the second day, their advance had stalled completely. By the end of the third day, some Vorthon units were refusing orders to attack human positions. "This makes no sense," the Vorthon field commander complained in a transmission that human intelligence intercepted. "They cannot win. Why do they not surrender?" Sullivan heard the message and broadcast her own response on all frequencies. "Because surrender is not in our vocabulary." The siege continued for 2 weeks. Humans ran out of food and started eating anything they could find. They ran out of water and collected moisture from the air recycling systems. They ran out of ammunition and made new weapons from scrap metal and chemicals. Most incredibly, they ran out of hope, but kept fighting anyway. Zexthal watched Dr. Jennifer White, a biologist who studied plant growth, jury-rig a communication system from broken equipment. She had no training in electronics, but she needed to coordinate the defense. So she learned, building knowledge from trial and error while enemy fire exploded around her. "How do you know how to do this?" Zexthal asked, watching her splice wires together with tools meant for plant research. "I don't," White admitted. "But Tom needs medical evacuation, and Sarah needs more explosive components, and Kate needs to know where the enemy is massing for their next attack, so I figure it out." This was the pattern Zexthal observed again and again. Humans did not accept limitations. When they needed something done, they found a way to do it. When they did not have the right tools, they made new tools. When they did not have the right knowledge, they learned. Professor Mike Chen, who studied ancient rock formations, became an expert in military tactics within days. Dr. Lisa Park, who specialized in plant biology, became a skilled sniper. Research. Assistant Tony Garcia, who was 19 years old and had never been in a fight, became a demolitions expert who could make bombs from household chemicals. The Vorthons could not understand this adaptability. Their own warriors were specialists trained for specific roles. They did not expect a biologist to become a sniper or a geologist to become a military engineer. This flexibility made human defensive positions impossible to predict or counter. The most disturbing incident came during the second week when the outpost's water recycling system was damaged beyond repair. Without water, the humans would die of dehydration within days. The logical response would be to surrender immediately. Instead, Sullivan implemented strict rationing that gave each person barely enough water to survive. She personally oversaw the distribution to make sure no one took more than their share. The humans accepted this death sentence without complaint. "You are killing yourselves slowly," Zexthal pointed out. "Surrender would be more merciful." "Surrender means the enemy wins," Sullivan replied. "We choose how we die." The humans organized themselves to share the burden of dying. They took turns going without water so others could have a little more. They collected every drop of moisture they could find. They licked condensation from metal walls and saved their own saliva in containers. They survived by collectively agreeing to suffer together rather than submit individually. This level of group sacrifice was something Zexthal had never seen in any other species. The siege ended on day 14, but not because the humans were defeated. The Vorthon commander, facing mounting casualties and plummeting morale among his troops, ordered a retreat. His warriors were refusing to attack positions defended by humans who seemed to grow more dangerous as they grew weaker. The final straw came when Dr. Jennifer White, dying of dehydration and exhaustion, single-handedly destroyed a Vorthon armored vehicle using a bomb made from laboratory chemicals. She died in the explosion, but her sacrifice broke the last of the enemy's will to continue the attack. When human relief forces finally arrived, they found 43 survivors out of the original 120 defenders. The survivors were barely alive, but they were still at their positions, still ready to fight. Captain Sullivan's final report was one sentence long: "Mission accomplished. Facility secure." She had held an indefensible position against impossible odds for 2 weeks with mostly civilian personnel. She had done it by refusing to accept defeat and convincing everyone under her command to make the same choice. The psychological impact on the Vorthons was devastating. They had lost an entire assault force to a handful of scientists and maintenance workers. Their military reputation, built over centuries of easy conquests, was destroyed by humans who would not give up. After Outpost 7, Vorthon forces began avoiding human positions whenever possible. They had learned that fighting humans was not just expensive in terms of casualties. It was expensive in terms of morale, confidence, and the will to continue fighting. The humans had weaponized their own refusal to die, and it was more effective than any gun or bomb they had ever built. The council chamber was completely silent now. No one moved. No one spoke. The implications of what Zexthal had described were sinking into their minds like poison. These were not the weak, emotional creatures they had expected to hear about. "So, I ask you," Zexthal said, his voice cutting through the silence, "what do we do about the humans?" General Carthan was the first to speak. His voice was strained. "Surely you exaggerate. No species can be as you describe." Zexthal reached into his armor and pulled out a small metal object. It was a human medal, dented and scratched from battle. He placed it on the table where everyone could see it. "Colonel Murphy gave me this when my assignment ended. It is called The Medal of Honor. Humans give it to soldiers who risk their lives to save others. Do you know what the image shows? The officers leaned forward to look. The medal showed a simple figure of one soldier carrying another. Not a weapon, Zexthal continued. Not a victory symbol. Not a conquered enemy. It shows one human carrying a wounded comrade to safety. This is what they consider the highest form of courage. Sacrificing yourself to save others. He paused, to let this sink in. I have spent 3 years studying human military capabilities. I have watched them fight. I have fought beside them. I have seen what they become when they are pushed to their limits. And I tell you now, we must never fight these creatures unless we have no other choice. Admiral Vexton, head of the Corvan fleet, shifted uncomfortably. They are still just one species. Their technology is not superior to ours. Their numbers are limited. How dangerous can they really be? Zexthal looked at the Admiral with something close to pity. You think this is about technology and numbers? You still do not understand what I am telling you. He stood and walked to the great window that looked out over the capital city of Corvan Prime. Millions of his people lived and worked in the buildings below. They felt safe behind their military might and advanced defenses. The humans do not fight to win battles, Zexthal said. They fight to win wars. They do not fight to conquer territory. They fight to protect ideas, and they will sacrifice everything to protect those ideas. He turned back to face the council. During my final month with them, I witnessed the destruction of the human cruiser Liberty. It was surrounded by 6 Vorthan warships. The crew knew they could not escape. They knew they could not win. So they did something that no other species would consider. The council waited. They aimed their ship at the largest Vorthan vessel and engaged their engines at maximum power. Captain Robert Hayes transmitted one final message before impact. For everyone we could not save. Then he rammed his ship into the enemy flagship and destroyed both vessels. Zexthal walked back to the table. The humans lost 300 crew members in that action. The Vorthans lost 800. But the real damage was not in the numbers. The real damage was in the message that action sent to every Vorthan commander in the fleet. He picked up the medal and held it so the light caught the medal. The message was simple. We will kill you, even if it kills us. We will make you pay a price for fighting us that you cannot afford to pay. We will turn our own deaths into weapons against you. General Carthan leaned forward. But surely such tactics would exhaust their population quickly. They cannot sustain such losses. That is what the Vorthans thought, Zexthal replied. They calculated that humans would run out of volunteers for suicide missions within months. They were wrong. The waiting list for hazardous assignments grew, longer after the Liberty's sacrifice, not shorter. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Several officers looked sick. I do not understand their psychology, Admiral Vexton said quietly. Neither do I, Zexthal admitted. But I understand the results. Every time the Vorthans killed humans, more humans volunteered to fight. Every human death became a reason for other humans to fight harder. The Vorthans were trying to break human morale by inflicting casualties. Instead, they were creating more enemies. He sat down and placed the medal on the table. The humans have a saying. You can kill us, but you cannot defeat us. I thought this was just words until I saw it in action. They are right. You can destroy human ships, human bases, human worlds, but you cannot destroy the idea that drives them to fight. What idea? General Carthan asked. That some things are worth dying for, that some things are worth killing for, that the people you love are more important than your own life. Zexthal looked around the table. They do not fight because they hate their enemies. They fight because they love their families. Colonel Hexmore, one of the younger officers, spoke up. So what do you recommend? Zexthal was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of 3 years of hard experience. Do not fight them unless you must. If you must fight them, end it quickly. The longer a conflict lasts, the more dangerous they become. They learn from every battle. They adapt to every tactic. They turn every defeat into a lesson for future victory. He stood up again. Most importantly, do not underestimate them because they seem emotional or irrational. Their emotions are not weaknesses, they are weapons. A human fighting for his family is worth 10 soldiers fighting for pay. A human fighting for his beliefs is worth 100 soldiers fighting for orders. Admiral Vexton asked the question that everyone was thinking. Are they a threat to us? Not if we leave them alone, Zexthal said. Humans do not start wars for conquest or resources. They start wars to protect what they love. As long as we do not threaten what they love, they will leave us in peace. And if we do threaten them, Zexthal looked at each council member in turn. Then we will learn what the Vorthons learned, that there are fates worse than defeat. There is the horror of fighting an enemy that turns every loss into motivation for revenge. An enemy that grows stronger through suffering. An enemy that would rather die fighting than live in surrender. He picked up the medal one final time. The humans taught me something during my time with them. They taught me that the strongest weapon is not the one that can destroy your enemy's body. It is the one that can break your enemy's will to fight. And no one has ever developed that weapon better than humans have. General Carthen asked the final question. What is your official recommendation? Zexthal's answer was simple and direct. Peace. Always peace with the humans. Because the alternative is not war as we understand it. The alternative is something much worse. The alternative is fighting a species that has weaponized love itself. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One last thing. During my assignment, I asked Colonel Murphy why humans fight so hard. For ideas that exist only in their minds. He told me something I will never forget. The council waited. He said, the things that exist only in our minds are the only things worth dying for. Because if we let those things die, we stop being human. And if we stop being human, then we really have lost everything. Zexthal left the chamber, carrying with him the knowledge that his people had encountered something unprecedented in the galaxy. Not just another military force, but a species that had turned the very concepts of love and sacrifice into instruments of war. The humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the most advanced. But they were something far more dangerous. They were the species that refused to be defeated no matter what the cost, and that made them the most dangerous enemy anyone could face.